Shri Krishna. Welcome to the International Gita Forum Caribbean's program Gita Discussions, which is aired on IETV at this time, and in which we have our consultant, Senior Pandit Vickramaditya Maharaj of the Upkara Foundation, who is going through the verses with us and in conversation, and also answering questions. Again, as we begin, thank you all for the many questions that have come in and the comments. And Panditji, there is one question I would pose to you at this point regarding Bhagavad Gita itself. And one of the questions that came up was, how would you explain, and I think while it's a whole process, we can do it answered very shortly, I feel. Why would Lord Krishna, the question is, why would Lord Krishna encourage Arjuna to fight? People still have a problem grasping that idea. It's as though fighting in itself is something evil. How would you respond to this question?
But Arjuna was a soldier.
So his duty was to fight.
He was trained as a soldier. Mm-hmm. And if he's been trained as a soldier, and he doesn't expect to fight at some point in his life, he's going to have serious problems. The problem was not fighting. Fighting is not the issue. Do not fight with attachment. The same way in performing different karmas. Perform the karma. Don't be attached to it, because if you perform the karma with attachment, you are leading yourself to a continuous cycle of birth and death.
And what the issue is you know, it's I think it's disingenuous in some ways to say Lord Krishna is encouraging Arjuna to fight. He's encouraging him to perform his duty.
Lord Krishna didn't start the war, he didn't cause the war.
Yeah, right? In fact, he tried in many ways to stop it.
If anybody tried to stop that war, it was Lord Krishna. Nobody else could take credit for that except him.
Yeah.
Now there's another beautiful note, that if you enter this life, this world, with spiritual enlightenment, which is what Lord Krishna is trying to give to Arjuna, you will not have anxieties in the mind. You are enlightened. So the pair of opposites wouldn't affect you. Material things.
If you come in that way already.
Yes.
If you've already achieved that level.
You will reach a different level. This is why you find sometimes a child is born, and after 2-3 years of birth, the child can pick up a piano and play Tchaikovsky or Mozart. How is that possible? You bring it with you. You have a certain level of understanding that you didn't accomplish what you did in the past. You couldn't finish the job. So you have now come back here now.
So what you're raising is a very important question about the differences that take place, the differences in birth, differences in circumstances.
Yes.
Yeah, if this is my first and only birth, and I want to ask that question without answering it, for you to think about. Again, you see, anytime we use a philosophy, the philosophy must answer my questions, and not with belief only. There must be logic. If this is my first birth, if I'm coming here and this is my first birth, and I didn't exist before, and I am born here now, but wait, just as I am born, millions of children are being born worldwide, and all in different circumstances. And we asked this question already. How do you account for those differences? And the only answer that can give an account for those differences without assuming God is partial. But that's another thing. Bhagwan is not partial in the Hindu philosophy. There is nothing like God people. Everybody is God's people. Bhagwan created the entire cosmos, and Bhagwan is equally present in all. So there aren't any that Bhagwan says, oh God, if you use a good God, that God is partial to somebody and he hates another one. Because if all are born at the same point and there is no previous life to explain the differences at birth, why are some born in privileged positions and others are not? That philosophy of my being created at birth with no previous history falls down, because it fails logic, because it suggests then that Bhagwan is
prejudiced.
He like you and he hate me. Why? He like your beard and he like you and in fact that I don't have one?
So when your beard get my color, you might like you.
So devotees, ladies and gentlemen, this is an important issue. So reincarnation and the law of karma, which is what we are discussing here to a great extent. Birth, death, and in between birth and death, the law of karma says the actions that we perform, if we can perform them in a disinterested spirit, then the consequences of those actions are non-binding. What is binding? Are the performance of actions which are done with a motive and an intent. Then the results of those actions attend us, and we have to come back in order to deal with that karma. Panditji, last day we stopped at verse 53. Maybe we can resume from that same verse and move forward.
Shruti vi pratipannanati yadata vyasi nishtala samadhava chala buddhi tato yogo mavapyasi. When your intellect is tossed about by different opinions, conflicts, it throws you off balance. But if you are a balanced person, those things will not affect you. So it could make you and it could help break you. You have to know, like I say, you have to, there's a beautiful katha in the Ramayana when they talk about the swan. That the swan has the ability to sift out milk from water.
From water, yeah.
The human mind is like that. You have to know what is right and what is wrong. And that I said in the last...
As we would say, filter out the noise.
Filter out the noise. 2 weeks ago I said, the flit gone. It's an experience in life.
Yeah.
So the experiences will tell you, what this person saying might be good, but it doesn't make sense. I don't want to offend you. So my mind is at peace, so I just say, yes, no problem, I'll think about it. And you leave them with that. And that is where it ends. Because if you see, the next verse is one of the most interesting, is the first time. And trust me if I tell you that. If you could do maths pretty good, add up 47 and 53, what you get? 100. In 100 verses of the Gita, this is the first time this happened. In verse 101. And what is that happened? Arjun says, Sthita pragyasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshava sthitadi kim prabhasheta kimasita brajeta kim. This 101st verse is the first question that Arjun asked. The first of 18. Remember we spoke about the 18 names of Lord Krishna, the 18 names of Arjun, and the 18 questions of Arjun. This is the first question that he has asked. And the question is, O Keshava, what is the mark of a person who is steadfast in wisdom, who is steeped in samadhi? How does the man firm in wisdom speak? How does he sit? How does he walk? Now to me, that indicates Arjun has an interest in this.
Now when we use the word samadhi, sometimes when people use the term samadhi, people think that, it's somebody in dhyan, like they're in sleep. Samadhi here means someone who is perfectly tranquil in mind.
Totally at peace with yourself.
At peace with yourself. It doesn't mean you are in meditation and away from the world.
No.
Samadhi in this context, I hope it helps clear. To be very clear that it's not a state of where like you're in meditation away from the doings and the experiences of the world. This perfect tranquility of mind is being defined as samadhi.
So devotees or viewers, this is the first of 18 questions. In a program we will deal with the 18 questions. So Lord Krishna, hearing this, he got what he wanted.
The platform on which to...
The Lord got what he wanted. He wanted Arjun to stray away from the material things that causing conflict in his mind. So Arjuna is now talking about samadhi. He's now talking about sthita pragya, sthitadi, samadhishta. This is what Lord Krishna wants. And immediately, Lord Krishna responds to him. Prajahati yada kaman saravana parta manogatam atmanyevatmana tushta sthita pragyasya tu uchati. Lord Krishna says, when a man is able to give up all desires in his heart and he is satisfied with himself, that is a man stable in wisdom. He responds at a very high level. Now all these verses leading up to verse 72 is talking about Brahman at a different level. Now, this verse, I use the word loosely, tickled my mind. I was looking for something to compare it with. And whilst going through the Upanishads, I came across a verse in the Upanishad.
Sure.
Yada sarve pramuchyante kama yesya hridi shritaha arto martyo mrito bhavat yatra brahmhasa mushnati. He says that when you eliminate from yourself selfish desires,
cravings of the mind of any sort,
when you give up that, get rid of it, then the material Jiva Atma, that Jiva Atma attains freedom from birth and death. So material desires are the problem. And the individual becomes godlike in virtue. That is in the Upanishads. So the material desires is the one that brings us down to the cycle of birth and death. And let me tell you something. Though it's not so easy to be born a human being again. Although we say if you do good and bad, you go born a human. If the bad outweigh the good, you're going a little step further back. And then you start back from 1 to 8,400,000. We are the last of the species. We were the last thing God created. Dukeshu digmanas sukeshu bigatsmriha Betaragabaya kroda sitaradi munyaduchyati. Now comes the interesting verse. He who is not perturbed by adversity. Some people cannot get bad news. They react terrible to bad news. A person who does not crave for happiness, who is free from fear, anger, and fondness, such a person is called a Muni. And totally wise, filled with wisdom.
Of stable mind.
Stable-minded person.
Listen.
Ye sarvatra nabhisneha tatta prapya shubha shubham nabhinandati nadveshti tasya pragya pratishtitaha. When you become unattached everywhere, you are not delighted in receiving good news, nor you are dejected in hearing bad news.
Mind is stable.
Your mind is always stable. Such a person, Arjuna, is a man on the path of wisdom. Yada sanharati chayam kurama sangiva sarvasah indriya indriyateja vyasya tasya pragyapatishtitaha. Now, look at the beautiful example that Lord Krishna draws. We all live in turbulent times. We all live in terrible time. And something I want to stress here, that Hinduism believes in nature worship. People don't understand that. We believe in nature worship. We worship nature. We don't only plunder the trees, we also plant. We believe in nature. We believe in the ocean. Why do we go to the ocean for Kartik? You understand what I'm saying? The largest religious gathering on the face of this earth
Kumbh Mela.
is the Kumbh Mela. The Ramayana begins in Kumbh Mela.
The last Kumbh Mela, we're looking at over 30 million people. It's the largest assembly of human beings for any given purpose.
Yeah.
And it's a religious get-together. The Kumbh Mela. And the banks
That's where the Ramayana begins.
Yeah.
And if you know the beauty of how the Ramayana describes it, Magam Karagat Ravi Jab Hoi Tirat Patahiye Av Sab Koi Deva Danuja King Nar Nar Shreni Sadar Majajahi Sakala Triveni. That when this auspicious time comes, the celestials, the devatas, the humans, the rakshas, everybody
come to that point.
There is no animosity. It's the coming together for this purpose of taking a bath in this divine stream. We are nature worshippers. People don't understand that. Like the tortoise, whenever he senses that there is difficulty, he pulls his forelegs into his shell, he pulls his tail into the shell, and he pulls his head into the shell, and he will stay there as long as it takes until he feels safe enough to come back out. The reference is made that the sense objects, the things that attract the mind, attract the senses, those are the things to withdraw from. And when you withdraw from them, then you are firm on the path of wisdom.
I think what our viewers and those who are looking at this program and studying Bhagavad Gita should get from this also is, in the world, Tujidas says it, you have good and bad, poison and pleasure. Everything exists here. You and I, what we have to do, look, I have met people and all they could talk to me about is, boy, how they are afraid because of the crime situation. No, the crime situation is something to be concerned about. But if you live your whole life and all you focus on that, then where will you find happiness? How will you find happiness? Happiness is not something you need to find tomorrow. You must find it here and now. And what we are being taught here is that we must have the ability, like the tortoise, to control what inputs come into our system through our eyes, our ears, our mouth, what we eat even. Everything that happens to us, every stimulus that comes to us through our senses, the idea of the tortoise pulling its limbs in all directions, deciding what it wishes to interface with and what it doesn't want to interface with, is a capacity that each of us have to develop. And here in this verse, your mind becomes steady when you are able to develop this capacity to withdraw from those things that are not to your benefit.
Okay. Verse 59. Vishaya vinivaratante niraharasya dehina rasavarajam rasopyasya paramadrishtva nivartati. The sense objects drop out from a mind of an individual who doesn't think about it. He has no inclination to want it. He has no longing for it. And he has no sense of wanting anything physical or material once his mind is focused on the Supreme Brahman. Now devotion, that term devotion, you ask people what does devotion mean? Devotion means love for the highest. That is what devotion means. So when somebody tells me bhakti, bhakti means love for the highest. And if you have love for the highest, then the lowest will fall away by themselves because they have nothing to cling on to. The material things will fall away. They can't cling on to you. There's nothing to hold them on. Yatato yapi kaunteya purushasya vipashritaha endriyani pramatini haranti prasavam mana. When the senses are excited, it throws you overboard. It really throws you overboard. Even the wise man gets caught when his senses become excited. The best example of that, Vickramaditya. Vickramaditya was so close to realizing God. And I won't tell you what was the cause for him to stray away. Let me leave that out of the picture. But even he fell victim to it. Because nobody is exempted from this. And this is why I hear people say this one is better than this one, or this one is different from this one. No. When the right Maya comes to you, you will fall victim to it. Nobody is exempted from Maya. Even though you are striving for perfection, there are always going to be obstacles in your way. Do not believe that what we have attained, or what I have attained, or what all pundits have attained, it was a smooth sailing until we reach there. No, it's not. It never is. And it never will be. Tani saravani neyamya yukta asita mataparaha vashayehi yasya indriyani tasya pragya pratishtitaha. Control the senses, Arjuna. Focus on the Supreme Brahman. That is the ultimate goal. Because we have all come from the Supreme. And our mission as Sanatanis Hindus is to go back to the ultimate where we came from. And God is compassionate. If he wasn't compassionate, he'd be living alone. Because nobody would reach him. So he gives us the opportunity, birth after birth, again and again. He gives us the chance, he gives us the opportunity to purify ourselves, to become one with him again. The person who has wisdom is a person who has his senses under control. That is a wise man. Dhyayate vishayan punsa sangasteshu pajayati sangat sanjayati kama kamata krodha vidayati. The more we think about material things, is the more we develop an attachment to them. And the more we are attached to it, is the more we have the desire to acquire it. And when we cannot acquire it, then anger comes. Anger doesn't come by itself. Anger comes when our desires are obstructed from being fulfilled. That is when desire steps in. There is a beautiful verse in the Bhagavad Puran that says, Yati pritibhyam avahi yabhyam hiranyam pashhavastriyaha na duhyanti manapritim punsa kama hatasyati. Now, if you get all the wealth in the world, Pandit, all the luxuries that you want in the world, and all the sensual objects that you want, you acquire it, your desires still will not be satisfied.
Yeah. Once there persists this idea of desires upon desires.
That's right. So the Bhagavad Puran says, those who know this, that this is what? This is the cause of misery in the world. An intelligent person should renounce desire. Because there is no fulfilling of desire. You know, I hear people say when we're doing puja, now is the time to pray for what you want. Ask God for what you want. Mm-hmm. Boss, God will not be listening to you. Somehow we misunderstand the phrase Samadarishi. Samadarishi means God knows everything. If you go to chapter 9, Lord Krishna says to Arjuna, I will not supply my devotees with what they want. I provide for my devotees their needs, not their wants. Give up this desire, Arjuna. Krodha bhavati sanamoha sanamoha smiti vibrama smiti vyashada buddhinasho buddha nasha pranashyati. From anger comes delusion. From delusion comes confused memory. From confused memory, ruin. Ruin of what? Ruin of reason. And when your reasoning is gone, then you perish. Now, anger doesn't arise by itself. Anger is created when our desires are obstructed from being fulfilled.
Yeah.
And that is what we could discuss. If you want to go further, we could discuss that.
No, I think if we just recap a bit the thought process that Bhagwan is giving here. He's saying one who is unattached to everything, meeting with good and evil, neither rejoicing nor recoiling from it. Your mind is stable. We are being advised, like the tortoise, to decide what is in our best interest. Stay away from things that, I'm using normal terminology we use daily, stay away from things, assess things. And very importantly, we are being taught that what we should do is bring our senses under control. How do we bring our senses under control? By controlling our desires. And then in the other verses, we are going to a break. I'll just recap here and then we'll have to break. When we're being told by Bhagwan, when we dwell on sense objects, when we have desires, I want to achieve something. So I want to get this pen, and let's use a simple desire. Then as I keep focusing on getting this pen, I develop attachment. Now, from attachment springs a desire. I want it. I must get it. Now, if I get it, then what happens? The cycle starts again. I want the phone now, as you said. We want something again, something all the time. But at some point, I will have a desire, and then what happens? I cannot achieve it. I see somebody I like, say, let's use a normal thing, and I cannot achieve that person. I cannot get that person. Say, if we use that example. Basically, this desire now unfulfilled, the unfulfilled desire now results in anger. And as Panditji says, from anger arises delusion, confusion of memory, loss of reason. And when we have a loss of reason, one goes to complete ruin. How could we explain one human being killing another human being for $200? Happened in the news recently. Or one brother killing another brother over where a post goes to separate two properties. Loss of reason, devotees, ladies and gentlemen, comes about when you look at what happens in this world today. It's all because of the whole issue of people having desires unfulfilled. Panditji, we need to break and then we will continue. Please stay with us. You are watching Bhagavad Gita discussions on IETV, a production of the International Gita Forum, Caribbean. Jai Shri Krishna. Welcome back to Bhagavad Gita discussions, a production of the International Gita Forum Caribbean and IETV. Pandit Vikramji, before the break, we were talking about the process. Desires unfulfilled, resulting in anger, and from anger, what occurs?
Delusion.
And we proceed from there.
And then you bring about your own, the final step is your own self-destruction. That is the end product of it. You end up destroying yourself.
And it all starts because of desire.
Because of a desire that you cannot fulfill.
You may fulfill some, and then they will give more rise to more
Desire
desires.
that cannot be fulfilled
Gives rise
leads
to
to
anger.
these things.
Yeah. And your ultimate ruin.
And the ultimate goal is that you perish, you die with it. So we continue. Ragadesha viyuktastu vishaya indriya sharan atma vasaye videyatma prasadhamadhigacchati. Lord Krishna says that when we live a disciplined life, we move amongst the sense objects in the world and we are not attracted to it, or nor are we affected by it. And if you could achieve that, Arjun, then you gain this inner peace. You are at peace with yourself. You know, I've always said, when we were growing up, by 6 o'clock you must reach home and wash your foot and in the puja room like in a deer. Do what you want, that's your concern. But that discipline is always there. You have to instill discipline in children from birth. And don't depend on nobody to do the job for you. And so when they move around these, now, if a child is living in a home where all kind of badness happening, when that child visits the home of a friend, he will pick up things and carry it home. You know, we have to teach our children, do not touch things that doesn't belong to you. You know, sometimes you go to the puja in a home and you see the wall right up with chalk and pen. Right? Because a child did it. But nobody corrected the child, so the child thinks it's right. So this self-control, Arjun, you have to develop this self-control to get what? Tranquility, peace of mind. Prasade saravadukhanam hanirasyoupajayati prasanachetaso hyashu buddhi parayavatishtate. When you are at peace, Arjun, tranquility, only then you could destroy sorrow. Only then that could happen. Because the intellect of a person who is at peace is anchored, it is set on what is called equilibrium. Nasti buddhira yuktasya nacha yuktasya bhavana nacha bhava yata shantir shantasya kuto sukham. There is no wisdom, Arjun, for a person who is fickle-minded. Nor is there meditation in him. And to one who cannot meditate, he cannot find peace. And if you cannot find peace, how are you going to enjoy happiness? Pandit, let me break up this a little simpler.
Sure.
You know, I am accustomed to the Pandit who come and sit down and do my puja for me, and I like how we do it until I hear a Pandit playing organ. So I like the organ. So I dump my Pandit now and I jump to this next one. And then I realize halfway down the river, he could only sing, he can't read and explain nothing. So I leave him now to go to our next one. You're moving and you're going around your whole circle, your whole life going that way. When he says, you are fickle-minded. That is what happens to fickle-minded people. They believe that the Pandit could do everything for them and they don't want to help themselves. You have to learn to meditate. Try it 1 minute, half a minute, quarter minute, 5 seconds. Try it. And every week increase it by 5 seconds. And you'll see how nice it is. Because the end product of life is to be at peace and to enjoy eternal happiness, which you are depriving yourself of by being fickle-minded. Indriyanam vicharatam yanamano no vidiyati tadasya harata pragyam vayuranava vibhavasi. As the boat in the ocean is being pushed by the wind, the same way our senses are being pushed around. The fickle-minded person, his senses is being pushed around, and then he loses his ability to tell right from wrong. Discrimination. He loses that. And when you lose that Arjun, you literally become a nothing. You literally become a nothing. Tasmadasya mahabaho nigrihitaniya sarvasha indriya indriyaratibhya tasya pragya pratishtitaha. Therefore I say to you, Arjun, restrain your mind, restrain your senses, bring them under control, that you could enjoy the bliss of divinity. You could enjoy that bliss. And how do you begin to do this, Arjun? Ya nisha sarva bhutanam tasya jagrati sanyami yasya jagrati bhutani sa nisha pashyatu munahi. When the entire world is asleep, the disciplined mind is awake. When the disciplined mind is awake, the entire world is asleep. Now, you know, when we were studying, they always say, what you study in the morning, 3, 4 o'clock, you learn more. Some people it works, some people it don't. Now, how do you bring the senses under control? If you watch horse racing, you realize they put blinkers for a horse. You know why they put blinkers for the horse?
Yeah, horse focus.
So he could only see what the jockey wants him to see. Right. That is what Lord Krishna is doing. Putting on blinkers for Arjun. Blank out all these material things, all these sense objects, blank out everything, and remain focused on that Atma, on that Supreme God. And when you remain focused on that Supreme Lord Arjun, your mind will automatically cling to that and that alone. By the time you remove the blinds, he is firmly established in the Brahman. And having been firmly established in Brahman, he doesn't see anything else in the material world. Apudayamanam machalam pratishtam samudramapa pravishanta yadavat tadavat takamayam pravishanta sarve sashantam apnoti nakamakami. The one who attains peace is not the one who has desires. Give up desires, you can attain peace. And when you attain this peace, Arjun, everything merges into this ocean. Everything merges. All your senses, everything, you plunge yourself into this. And plunging yourself into this, you become one with it. You merge with it. Vihaya kamanaya sarvan pumascharita nismriha nirmamo nirahankara sashantim adigachati. The individual attains peace who lives in a world free from desire, free from longing, free from craving, and give up two things, Arjun: I and mine. Give up I and give up mine. Give up these two things. As long as you have worldly desires, you will never have peace of mind. So you have to give up one to get one. You cannot have the best of both worlds. Nobody can accomplish that. You have to give up one to get one. Once you have this feeling of I and mine and I and mine, it is more bondage karma you are creating with I and mine, I and mine. Esha brahmi stita partha nainam aprapya vimukhyati stitavasya mantakalopi brahma nirvana mritchati. O Parth, O Arjun, this is called the state of Brahman. Once you attain this, you will never be bewildered again. Even at the final moment, what we call death, even at that point, Arjun, the mind doesn't swerve away from it. And you get oneness with Brahman. You become one with it. The end product of life is to become one with the Supreme. And chapter 2 tells us, begins the journey, how to become one with two. In the Rig Veda, there is a beautiful verse that is written, Tadavishanu param padam sada pashyanti suryaha. Once the soul attains God, it doesn't come back into this world again. It remains in one with Him. It never comes back into the material world of birth and death. Devotees, this is not easy to do. This is not an easy job. This is a discipline that has to start.
And I think, Pandit, I was thinking as we going through this, just to ensure there isn't a misunderstanding. We are saying that we should control our desires. We should try and avoid indeterminate numbers of desires, because even as you fulfill desires, other desires will come. Mm-hmm. Now, Bhagavan Sri Krishna tells us here, becoming stable in mind doesn't mean that I no longer experience whatever life brings. I was thinking that some people may think you could go with the idea that if I'm not to have desires, then I mustn't go about my duty, I mustn't buy a car. We're looking at householders. I mustn't build a house, I mustn't develop. You do these things,
but you are not attached to it.
Without being attached to it. Now, it might be difficult. You're performing your duty. So the person of stable mind, Bhagavan Sri Krishna had a stable mind. He was king of Dwarka.
Yeah.
He was not pauper. He faced life. So I think we should just expand on this idea a bit more for our viewers as we come to the end of this chapter. Becoming a man or woman of stable mind doesn't mean in somehow you're now a zombie sitting in a trance. You're living your life.
Yeah.
You're doing the things that have to be done. But your attitude and approach to life's experiences is where Krishna Bhagavan is telling us.
Right. So, what Sanatana Dharma teaches us basically is that life is divided into 4 groups. One is called Brahmachari.
Yeah. 4 stages, yeah.
I say group.
Groups, okay, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
And in the first group, all your intention is only one thing. To study. To study.
Develop skills.
Develop your skills. And you, according to our scriptures, that the human body is designed to last 100 years. This is why we say it's divided in 4, 25 years each. Now, the second 25 years is where we become householders.
Grihastis, yeah.
We marry, we build house, we have all the nice furnishings and all the tra-la-la-la-la, children, everything.
Seek to ensure continuation of your lineage, right. Continuation of society, transmitting your values.
Then you have children in that period of time. When you enter this third stage of life, your children would have come out of the first stage of their life.
On average, yeah.
Well, the average.
Yeah.
Unless you want to have children at 50 and 60, I'm glad for you. So, when you are in the third stage, you are now preparing yourself to hand over the material responsibilities to the children who are now stepping out of the first school.
And we can use the modern term we use of succession planning.
Well,
preparing for your ultimate. The fact is, we all will become redundant, no matter who we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, we're going to be nobody. Some sooner than later.
Yeah. So you have a duty to ensure that you prepare, and I think that's a problem we see in society, which is why there are so many cases in court concerning land and all these things, because we don't prepare for our ultimate demise.
Right. So when our children see us preparing the way we are preparing, to hand over the responsibilities, it doesn't mean I give my children my house, my bank account, everything, and then I go in the forest to live. Come on, I'm smarter than that. I'll get killed in the forest. I'll be living in the house.
Oh, which forest?
Charuma forest. I'll be living in the house, but I have no material responsibility towards that property.
I start divesting that, training your children to look after.
Well, if I give it to you, you don't expect me to pay the bills after. No, I'm not redoing it. I renounce it. I'm not renouncing my life. I renounce that stage of life, which is the responsibility of it. So I'm not going to give it to you without the responsibility. That is being foolish. When they will learn responsibility?
I think there's a period, we look at what you're referring to as vanprust. My explanation of vanprust would be, while yet in the home, as you're saying, I am not giving up responsibility, I'm preparing you to take over responsibility. It's a period of tutelage, a period of mentorship. In terms of, we're not on a legal program, so, in terms of handling the issue of property transition on death and so, it's not something we want to discuss here. But there are mechanisms by which you do that. You retain ownership for as long as you live, and then on your demise, speaking with a different career hat on, one of the things we should do with our properties always is that at the point of our death, the transition would take place without anybody having to do anything again. Because if you leave things unsorted out, then you're leaving a situation where others are going to make money off your property. Because lawyers have to get involved, you have to deal with issues because you didn't deal with it while you were alive. But Pandit makes a good point, because there are many cases too, Pandit, where people, I would say, too early, they give their properties over to their children. With the expectation that my children will look after me, and then what happens? You no longer have an interest, a legal interest in your property, and then you become a burden to your children, and then you end up in homes. That point we spoke of earlier. Yeah. So the vanprust stage is where within the home itself, this third grouping, as you say, where you begin this process of recognizing that you are going to have to hand over. Panditji.
So the point I was making earlier, as you raise it a second time, the people who put their parents in home, the exception to the rules, they have medical issues that children can't deal with. And a home might be the best place to do it. But not because I give you my house and I'm a burden to you, put me in a home. I could never accept that. On that condition, I would never accept it.
I agree.
That was the condition I was talking about. So, whilst we are preparing to depart the world, we are doing two things at the same time. For the first time in our life, we are doing two things. Preparing our children to take over and preparing ourselves to leave. The only way I could accomplish both, I cannot be attached. Now, there is a beautiful...
But to even do that, to hold it out, but to even decide to prepare your children must mean that I have a recognition that I cannot be attached to these things, because ultimately they don't go with me. Please continue.
There's a beautiful line that says, when my children, and I'm not talking about mine personally, my children means universal, were taking their first step, where was I? I was sitting on a chair behind them with my two index finger pointing downwards. And the child will hold the two index finger.
Okay, I now understand what you're
talking
about.
And you pull them up.
Yeah.
And you teach them to walk. So, whilst my children were taking their first step, I was there for them. Now I am taking my last steps. And you discard me? You understand the concept? Now is the time. I don't need anything from you. But now, I was there when you took your first. Why can't you be there for me when I take my last? That is what we need to instill in our children. From birth, you teach them that. Responsibility. You have a responsibility.
But even on saying that, as a parent too, we're speaking here now in worldly terms, I will not want to place upon my children an expectation or a burden that you must look after me. If you feel that that's your duty, if you have been brought up that way, I would prefer them not feel burdened that they must do it,
Okay.
but rather it should be a sense of duty on their part.
Well, one of the verses in the Bhagavad Puran says that if I live for 100 years, I cannot repay my parents for giving me birth.
Yeah.
In 100 years, I cannot do it. If my children saw the way I treated my parents badly, do I expect them to treat me good?
Yeah.
So we believe in, that is what Sanatana Dharma is, continuity. They learn from the experiences that they have, right? If your siblings fighting amongst each other, you expect your children and your
Not to fight? Yeah.
I mean, come on, Pandit man. There are no mantra for that. My Aji would have said, Karo mein davai, dunya mein naba. God didn't make the medicine to cure stupidity.
Yeah.
So we have to be very careful. Our children are going to learn from what we do. And we do expect them to learn at 17 and 18. That's when they have the old
And it's
life.
not just what we do in public, huh?
No, no, no.
How we live our life. Yeah.
What we do, right? If my children grow up in a home where food is not cooked, you expect them to cook. They will continue buying food to eat. So Sanatana Dharma teaches us very simply 4 stages of life. We all have to go through the 4 stages. But chapter 2 emphasizes in us, do not be attached to it.
In each stage, recognize that
Yes.
ultimately
Because
you're passing
when
through.
you are in the
Yeah.
student class, when you are in the student group, somebody who knows more than you teach you. When you become the householder, there are plenty men before you build magnificent palaces to live in, which you could never accomplish in a lifetime. But the end product is the same.
But you
We are
should
all
not
going to die and
compare
leave.
yourself with others either.
No.
That's another thing.
But that is where the desire comes in.
Yeah. Compare yourself with yourself yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah?
Am I better off
Become the
today
best
than
that you
yesterday?
can be. And don't compare yourself with others. There will always be people who have done more than you, and there will always be people who have done less than you.
But the bottom line to me is, I have done the best that I could.
Good, yeah.
And with these few words, iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita su, Upanishatsu, Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastri, Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvadi, Sankhya Yog Nam Dvitiyo Adhyayah, Bolo Shri Krishna Bhagavan Ki
Jai.
Devotees, that ends chapter 2 of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita.
At this time, having completed the second chapter, the remaining time in this program, Panditji, as we spoke about children and so, Panditji has done 2 publications, the Bal Chitra Ramayana and the Bhagavad Gita in Doha. Panditji, can you share with our viewers some information on these publications?
But there was always the belief that Sanskrit is very difficult to read. It is very difficult if you make it difficult. And everybody, or most people that I have met, like singing
Yeah.
for some strange reason. The Doha Gita could be read by musicians. They could play music for it, and the translation is the same. It's just we have eliminated, let me use that word carefully, we have taken out the Sanskrit verses and replaced them with Doha. And the meaning is the same, nothing has changed. So those who are interested could get in touch with me. And the Balchit Ramayana, we have done it in such a way, it's like a comic book. What we have done, we have pictures in it with the chowpais and the transliteration, which a child could read, and the English explanation, which a child could read. And in 32 pages, in 144 verses, you get a pretty good idea what the entire Ramayana is about.
So this is for children, really?
It really is for children,
And,
but it
those who
doesn't mean
have
that
an
an adult
interest-
won't read it.
Yeah. And the Doha Ramayana, Panditji has also compiled, so that those who have an interest, you can contact Pandit Vikramji himself on these publications that have been done. In terms of Ramayana, Yagyas and so, on IETV, Panditji, we have a number of yajnas that are carried. We have actually carried Panditji's Sanskrit Ramayana some time back, and of course the head of Swaha, the Paramacharya of Swaha, his Ramayana yajnas also carried, Pandit Balaram, all the senior Pandits of Swaha, and others. IETV carries them once we have content of value that makes sense, that could be disseminated in this way.
Yeah.
So as we come to the end of this sixth program of the International Gita Forum, again, those of you who may have questions or comments, I invite you to send them. You can call Pandit Vikram directly on 652-1043 for any conversation or discussion you wish to have. And the WhatsApp number is for questions only. You WhatsApp the questions, which we can then take, assimilate, and decide which ones we can answer on the program. The response has been tremendous, and so if we are not able to answer all your questions immediately as they come, we will find time and deal with them as we go along. We've now completed chapter 2, and at this point I want to thank you all for viewing, and we will resume in our next session. Until then, Jai Shri Krishna.